And I think it's the ultimate proof of what Trump really wants. He wants fealty in his subordinates. He doesn't want loyalty. Loyalty is a virtue.
Mhm.
He wants submission. He wants people who will
Yeah.
do what he tells him.
Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well trained, well equipped, and battle hardened.
There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America.
Good night and good luck.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Lincoln Project Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Rick Wilson. I'm delighted to be joined today by Ambassador John Bolton, one of the most knowledgeable figures in foreign policy in my lifetime, and a guy who has been to the rodeo many, many times. And so, Ambassador, I know we're on a limited clock today, so I wanted to start up right away with you. I want to ask a question that is the impact of this trade war that we're presently in. It seems to me, and I want to get your thoughts on this, that the Trump administration has really stepped in a minefield here, and they're opening up a lot of space for China to use this trade war to build more economic and political military relationships throughout Asia and Africa. I wanted to get your take on that, the risks that poses.
Well, I think the risks are very severe. I think there are obvious economic problems with the tariffs and the negative effect it will have on the U.S. economy. We don't know how great the effect will be. There's a lot of speculation about it. I think we're now at the point where hopes and fears have balanced out, and we're going to have to rely on data to tell us exactly what's going to happen. And there's a lot of uncertainty that's been introduced into the economy, quite apart from the tariff rates. Those facts also affect us internationally, where I think there is a political impact, and it's measured in qualitative terms of our friends and allies, especially in Europe, in Asia, around the world, saying, what are they doing over there? Why are they imposing these burdens on us? If we've got problems, let's try and work them out. And rather than focus on the real bad actor in international trade, which is China, which steals our intellectual property, subsidizes their firms against ours. They've never really opened their domestic market the way they promised to. Why not go after that with our friends together in a coalition, as opposed to having a general Hobbesian war of all against all? And what this has done is rip through decades of effort by Americans, government, private sector, to build up relationships of good faith, goodwill, trust, reliance, that it's hard, you can't put it in dollars and cents terms, but it's going to hurt us because people now doubt our reliability and our credibility. China is definitely trying to step into that gap that we've created. They've certainly worked hard in Asian countries to say, look, let's stick together against this new American policy. And they're going to exploit it in Europe and elsewhere by people who simply don't understand why we've abandoned what we have advocated consistently since 1945, which is open trade relations. Look, we've got legitimate national security concerns about items that we should manufacture here. We
100%
certainly shouldn't have them manufactured in China. All of these things are correctable without blowing up the international trading system, which is what we're on the verge of doing.
Yeah, it strikes me that the international system of alliances that we built meticulously from 1945 on, not always perfectly, but meticulously, the combination of trade, diplomacy, shared values, and military alliances made America much safer in the world. It continues to baffle me why we've walked away from that combination of soft and hard power. I mean, abandoning USAID. I'm sure that the sacks of rice and soybeans that are going to appear in Africa now, they're going to have Mandarin on them instead of USAID. Talk about how that soft power opportunity for China in places like Africa, which is a globally contested field now, is going to play out.
Right. Well, I speak as an alumnus of AID and the Reagan administration back when we were trying to reform it to make it more market oriented. And this idea of using economic assistance to influence events in other countries is an old phenomenon. People can read Caesar's commentaries about his wars in Gaul and the effect that the Romans made of them. And look, I have no doubt after 8 years of Obama and then 4 more years of Biden, there were plenty of things to reform in USAID, reflecting back to the Reagan days. We didn't want it to be a world welfare agency. We wanted it to be something that promoted economic growth in countries of interest to us. That's why it was the inheritor of the Marshall Plan legacy. So I'm entirely on board with the idea that change was needed, but what they did was like the briefing officer in Vietnam who said, well, we had to destroy that village in order to save it. It's not the most persuasive thing to do. And I would couple with what they did in AID to what they've done to our minimal information statecraft capabilities in the Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Radio Marty, Radio Free Asia. Were they perfect? Of course not. Could they use substantial reform and upgrading? Absolutely. What have we done? We've shut our only communications vehicle off from the rest of the world at a time when, with rising tensions and adversaries trying to take advantage of us, we've just left the field. So we're going to build these capabilities back, I'll guarantee, in some future administration. The total cost of destroying them and then building them back may well be higher than if we had just tried to reform them internally like we did in the Reagan years. But that's part of the cost of the Trump administration.
So we talked a little bit about China here and their global position right now. The other major story, I think, that is and will continue to be the big question of our time is, how does Europe and the United States respond to Ukraine and the Russian invasion, the Russian war crimes? And I'm sure you've been as disappointed as I am, but not necessarily surprised by the constant sort of capitulation messages from Vance and Rubio and Trump and Witkoff, where they have made their position about who they really favor in this story very clear. Talk to me. You've seen a lot of diplomacy vis-a-vis the Russians. Talk to me about how unusual and disturbing this is for our country to be siding essentially with the aggressor in a war that could set Europe aflame.
Well, it's unprecedented, not just in modern times, but throughout American history. This is a reflection both of the isolationist tendency within the Republican Party that's unfortunately surfaced again. Vance is the principal example of that, but also of Trump, who doesn't have a philosophy of any sort, but whose instincts often skew isolationist. And also because of his unique view of international affairs. He believes that if he has a friendship with a foreign head of state, then the U.S. has good relations with that country. So if he's good friends with Vladimir Putin, then things are fine between the U.S. and Russia. Now, look, personal relations have their place. There's no doubt about it. But Vladimir Putin doesn't think he's friends with Donald Trump. He thinks, former KGB agent that Putin is, that he can manipulate Trump. And he has been manipulating him on Ukraine consistently. So the impression that this gives to our allies is that we've lost a strategic sense. Vance and others, Vance said during, I think, the 22 Senate campaign in Ohio that he didn't care what happened in Ukraine.
I think it's ridiculous that we're focused on this border in Ukraine. I got to be honest with you, I don't really care what happens to Ukraine one way or another.
And I tell you, I do care what happens in Ukraine, and we should, because after our experience in the 20th century, we've believed for 75 plus years that peace and stability in Europe are a vital American national interest for economic reasons, political, military reasons. So the act of unprovoked aggression, the second invasion of Ukraine in the past 15 years that Russia carried out in February of 22, negatively impacted American security here at home. And, I think our politicians have let us down since the end of the Soviet Union. They've failed to make the case effectively that a forward American foreign policy, a strong Reaganite kind of policy, benefits us at home. And if we don't protect our interest in the wider world, nobody else is going to do it for us. We're not doing this because we're nice people, although we are. We're doing it because it benefits us, and people need to hear that case being made, which Biden didn't do, and Trump doesn't understand it.
Yeah, I disagreed a lot with Jake Sullivan on how he approached the post-22 or the 22 post-invasion moment, where it seemed to be the most delicate sort of, like, we don't really want to get involved, but we'll do the minimum for the until the pain level gets too high. the point person on a lot of this negotiation with Russia has been Stephen Witkoff, who strikes me as someone who should never be allowed near diplomacy, national security, or anything else. Have you ever seen anybody who's a weaker player when they're a counterparty to Putin? Again, as you mentioned, ex-KGB, the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is a very sophisticated and determined organization. I feel like Witkoff deserves more attention than he gets, because this strikes me as Trump has sent somebody who is way underneath the par for this kind of assignment.
No, it's a stunning choice, not just in Ukraine, but with respect to Iran. And I think it's the ultimate proof of what Trump really wants. He wants fealty in his subordinates. He doesn't want loyalty. Loyalty is a virtue.
Mm-hmm.
He wants submission. He wants people who will
Yeah.
do what he tells him. And in Witkoff, he's writing on a blank page. In his various responsibilities, Witkoff didn't know anything about the Gaza Strip. He doesn't know anything about Russia. He doesn't know anything about Ukraine. He doesn't know anything about Iran. He doesn't know anything about nuclear weapons. He doesn't know anything about arms control and non-proliferation. And this is our lead negotiator on two of the most sensitive and potentially
Right.
dangerous issues we've got. He reports directly to Trump. What Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State and now National Security Advisor's actual role in all this is hard to discern. But this is not in the best interest of the United States. We do not have the A team on the field here.
Yeah, I think one thing, is as much as I've had some disagreements with Marco in the last few years, he knows what's going on. Marco is a more sophisticated thinker about foreign policy than certainly than Trump, and most certainly than Witkoff. But I think you're right. I think it's hard to tell how much latitude Trump actually gives him when you see Witkoff in the fore of all of these things. I wanted to jump for a moment because you mentioned Iran, which is which as much as it's that old dictum. You may not be interested in what Iran is doing, but Iran is interested in you. And right now, Trump is saying, "Oh, we've got a deal." Iran's saying we don't have a deal. Talk to me about where you see the state of play in the Middle East right now, because I think Iran is not less dangerous than it's been before. In fact, it's probably more so. And I'm curious where you see the state of play in that moment right now.
Well, I think we could be at a hinge point in the very near future. This disagreement about whether Iran should be allowed to enrich uranium for civil reactor purposes is not a new debate. This has been going on for a long time.
Sure.
And the central
since
flaw
since Bush won, or no, I'm sorry, since George W.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And the central flaw of the 2015 Obama deal was to give Iran any uranium enrichment capability at all, because although the percentage of enrichment you need to get for the U-235 isotope sounds wildly different, once you've enriched to reactor grade levels, you have fundamentally accomplished about 2/3 of the work you need to
Right,
do
you're most of the way there
to weapons grade levels. So they shouldn't have it at all. And indeed, when the U.S. licenses nuclear technology for civil reactors around the world, and most of it is our technology, even though we don't build them anymore, we typically insist that a recipient government promise not to do uranium enrichment and not to do reprocessing of the spent fuel to get plutonium out. So our allies in the Gulf region have said, you won't allow us to enrich uranium, but you permitted the Iranians to do it. Explain that one to us. And of course, there is no good explanation. So this is not a question of, shall I put my building on 57th Street in Manhattan or 56th Street? This is the core issue. That Witkoff doesn't seem to understand. I don't see there's any acceptable deal. And what that means is, I think the question before the Israelis right now is, how much longer are we going to wait and take the risk that Iran will get a deliverable nuclear weapon, or when are we going to act against that program? Trump himself, in his letter to the Ayatollah Khamenei, it's three and a half months ago now, said, I'll give you 2 months to talk. Well, I think we're pretty close to the end of the 2 months. There isn't a deal coming here, so we'll see whether Trump's red line remains or whether he wants really to do more talking.
Yeah, I think in some ways Iran has to be feeling a lot of its own clock pressure with Syria, with the Israelis and Gaza, with the Saudis trying to. I mean, this is one of the like old dirty secrets that everyone's always known. If the Saudis wanted to make nuclear weapons, they would probably find a way to do it.
Well, they
And
could
and
rent them from Pakistan very quickly. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
it's not hard to do. It'd be true for any of the Gulf Arabs. And,
Yeah.
their strategic view of the Iranian threat, both the nuclear program and the terrorist threat, is essentially identical to Israel's these days. That's where the Abraham Accords came from. There was important diplomacy involved, but it's because
Mhm.
the strategic interests are aligned. And in the Middle East today, the biggest threat to peace and security, bar none, is Iran.
I think that's exactly right. And that, things I've heard from folks in the Gulf in the last 5 years have always been they desperately wanted some sort of an accord, a deal with Bibi that they could, take not only to their people, but would secure a sort of de facto or de jure alliance against Iran that even if they armed up, they would be facing a truly formidable and unified opposition across the rest of the Middle East.
Yeah, and what the Gulf Arabs want from us is assurance that we're going to remain there, that we're not going to retreat, that we're not going to buy
Mhm.
the argument that these days Europe doesn't matter, the Middle East doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is China in Asia. The fact is, when we withdraw from a region, China appears, and they'd like nothing
Correct.
better than to have closer links to Iran. Iran is one of the outriders in what's emerging as the China-Russia axis. It will be a
Mhm.
major problem for us for the rest of the century.
I wonder if you have any thoughts about where does American diplomacy and national security policy go in a post-Trump era? I know we've only got about 5 minutes left, and that's kind of a big question for 5 minutes. But I'm starting to think we are going to reach the end of Trump. There will be an ending to Trump, and this country's going to have to reset. I think in a lot of different ways. And as a conservative, I still view our NATO centric and alliance centric foreign policy, and I view deterrence as valuable. Where do you see us having to reset most as we go forward in a post Trump era?
Well, I agree. I think people need to think about the post Trump era. And I don't think he's going to run for a third term. I think some of his recent interviews naming Vance and Rubio as possible successors, he knows it. Now, there's danger there because that removes a political guardrail. He knows he never has to face the voters again. It's the poor Republican House and Senate members that are going to have to do that next year. But I believe out in the country, I think most Republicans still have a Reaganite Bush approach. They believe in peace through strength, what Reagan meant when he said that, not what Trump means. And they understand the virtue of a strong foreign policy. I think, particularly in Congress and especially in the House, a lot of members are intimidated by Trump. They worry about a Trump primary opponent, particularly the House members, if they get nominated, they're going to win in November, but they need to protect against competition from a Trumper. And it's interesting if Elon Musk is really pulling back from politics now. That's one part of that threat removed, but they may be intimidated, but they don't agree with it. They go along because it's the convenient thing to do. So I guess that's good news and bad news. But the good news is I think the party will snap back quicker than people think. It will depend a lot on the threats we face around the world. And one point on which I do think Republicans agree, and a lot of Democrats too, is the threat from China. So that is something that I think helps focus people's attention. I think the other tent pole is Israel. Support for Israel is very strong in the Republican Party, stronger than in the Democratic Party,
Yep.
and that's where the next test may come. So all of these kind of pressures that are below the surface, I'm makes me optimistic 44 months from now that things will start to change. And I think maybe even after the 26 election, they'll begin to change.
I think 26 may actually cause some resets because a lot of these vulnerable Republicans on domestic problems are going to lose those seats.
Yeah.
I think the more he seems like he's not the determining factor of every election, every primary election in particular, the more people can be free to move back to the central tendencies of which we were all raised in the Republican Party back in the day. And I do think one other thing you mentioned is like there is an overlap on a lot of these things with Democrats as well these days. There is a bigger overlap than there's been on the China question in particular than there has been in a long time. And I would love to get back to a Scoop Jackson kind of feel in the Democratic Party here and there, so that there's a sense of national purpose on foreign policy questions, not just partisan or siloed purpose in those things.
Yeah, there really isn't a national security wing on the Democratic side now. I mean, it's hard to find the Democrats in Washington these days
Correct.
since the election. I don't know what they're doing, but I think having a robust debate will lead people to believe that our interests lie in presence in the world, and that we've just gotten lazy after the fall of the Berlin Wall in making the case to people. And a political leader or leaders who can emerge, who know how to do that and combine it with attractive domestic policies, I think are going to be very interesting candidates, maybe as early as 28.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Ambassador John Bolton, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. We really appreciate your time, as always. Great wisdom and insight on foreign and national security policy, as always. And we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Well, I'd look forward to it. Thanks for having me.
Hey, folks, that was a great interview with John Bolton. You know, we may disagree with John on some things from time to time, but known the guy for a very long time. And he brings a unique perspective to this conversation because he thought he was going to be in that first administration one of those people who could steer the ship towards conservative principles and sanity, and he just couldn't. Nobody could. Jim Mattis couldn't. John couldn't. Rex Tillerson couldn't, because Trump is always up in Trump's head doing what Trump does. We've got a few extra minutes on the show today, and one thing that over at the enemies list we've been doing a lot lately is answering people's questions, because it's hard to get these conversations over a podcast to happen sometimes. And, we talk back and forth on various social media platforms, but I wanted to answer a few questions today that people have asked about the Lincoln Project. And I wanted to give you some perspective on what we're doing. So I'd saved these up for the last couple of weeks. And the first question is, what is the Lincoln Project doing in 2025 to fight back against Trump and Trumpism? Okay, folks, the first thing we're doing is something that Democrats, and God love you, Democrats, I love you, love you, love you, but y'all suck at messaging. Y'all suck like an industrial water pump at messaging. Sternly worded letters do not work in the year of our Lord 2025.
We sent him a very strong letter just the other day, asking 8 very strong questions about why this isn't just a pretext.
Well, you'll let us know if you get a response to that letter. I do want to say, you said you hope that...
I will.
So one thing the Lincoln Project has been trying to do every day, whether it's on our socials, whether it's on our award-winning advertising, whether it's on our podcast, our streaming shows like The Breakdown, The Strategy Session, and others, is to talk about Trump in a context and a perspective that gives you the tools to fight back against your proverbial crazy uncle on Facebook. Because your crazy uncle on Facebook still loves Donald Trump. The love may be a little faded now that he's starting to realize that he didn't get what he voted for. He voted for cheaper gas prices and cheaper eggs, and he got a war with Greenland. He got siding with Putin. So part of our big job at the Lincoln Project has always been to build narratives, to talk about the world as we see it in a way that we believe, and from our experience are pretty good at talking to people about, that is effective as a communications tool. You can talk a lot in Washington about policy and about numbers and about bills and about programs and about plans. But a lot of what Lincoln does is talk to people at an emotional level, at a gut level. And it's something that Trump is very, very, very good at doing. He is good at making you feel emotions, outrage, disgust, horror, loathing. And he's good at making not only his people feel those emotions, but his opponents feel those emotions as well. And a lot of that's natural because he is a horrifying monster from hell. The second thing that Lincoln is doing in the year of 2025, we are doing a hard push in Virginia. We're going to be working in the governor's race. We're going to be working in 2 or 3 of the congressional races, and maybe more if the impact of Doge and Elon Musk's cuts in Virginia, which is now a meaningful fraction of Virginia's workforce, has taken a hit because of this. And by the way, these government employees they've been firing, they're not all woke DEI, Soros, politically correct plants. A lot of these people are the folks that aren't famous, that don't make a ton of money, that don't do anything ideological. It's weather forecasters. It's nuclear weapons security people. It's air traffic safety people. It's medical researchers. So a lot of these jobs that the MAGA folks would like you to think are all some part of a giant liberal DC conspiracy to make children communists that they're cutting, they're going to have a political cost in Virginia. And we're going to make that political cost for Republican members of Congress in that state. We're going to start beating them up this year, softening the ground. And we're going to help with the governor's race because we believe that Virginia is a great symbolic narrative-setting state for next year. People sometimes draw too many lessons from off-year elections, but if you get Abigail Spanberger into the governor's office there, the Republicans are going to collectively, nationally, and this is a sophisticated polling term that I'm going to use now, so bear with me, they're going to shit a brick because Donald Trump's campaign manager, Chris LaCivita, is running the entire Virginia operation for the Republicans, and he is in a state right now that he knows a lot about. He's very good at winning in Virginia. He's got a lot of money to spend. He's very good overall at campaigning. I never underestimate Chris, but right now they've got a candidate for governor named Winsome Sears, who is probably the singularly most tone-deaf candidate I've seen come down the Republican pike in a long time, and that's a high bar. She's not doing well. Republicans are leaking off the record and behind the scenes how disappointed they are with her as a candidate, but there aren't a lot of other people in the farm team right now who could step up and jump into that position. The lieutenant governor on the Republican side is a freak. So we believe Virginia in 2025 is a great place to go out and set narratives, talk messaging, explore how we move these voters who are being hurt by this. Our pool of voters at Lincoln has always been a narrow slice of persuadable Republicans and independents. A lot of people ask, like, why aren't you advertising to the deep MAGA people and convincing them? Because they are unconvincible. The guy with the truck nuts and the QAnon sticker and the Joe Biden tied up on the back of the truck decal and the flags and the boat parade stuff, he's not persuadable. The suburban Republican dad and mom who live in Loudoun County, Virginia, or any number of the other 50 counties in the country that make up 50% of the voting population that are behavioral Republicans. They don't love Trump. They thought he was the lesser of two evils. We think Virginia is a great place to experiment with a lot of messages that are going to expand and work in 2026. Now, the second part of that question is, what are you doing in 26? Look, guys, it's the simplest operation in the world. We must win the House. There will be 1,000 people with 1 billion ideas on how to win the House. Our idea is very clear. We're going to go into 20 to 25 of these swing congressional districts. We're going to make sure that Republicans, Democrats, independents, and everybody in those districts understands the cost they've paid since the president was sworn in January of this year. Because the cost is rising. The tariff war was going to lead to job loss. The job losses are going to lead to a recession. The recession is going to be exacerbated by the fact that Donald Trump has wrecked our national credit rating and the price of lending is going up. All the things that are in this toxic sort of gumbo, they're all Trump. They're all on him. These were choices he made, and the voters who voted for him, they weren't after a recession. They weren't after seeing their farms close down. They weren't after seeing their small business get wrecked because of tariffs. All these things that these voters are going to face between now and the election day in 26, we also know that we're very good at not letting people chase the Republican bait. So they're going to tell you the election in 26 is all about trans people and immigrants and witchcraft and whatever the hell else comes up out of whatever fucked up focus group they do. Whatever they dredge out of the Republican sewer. Okay? All of that is going to shape the battlefield. Our messaging ability, and my grandmother used to say false modesty is the worst kind, so don't be that way. Our messaging ability is very strong. We're going to continue to strengthen it. We're going to go into those districts next year We're going to work our asses off. We're going to message. We're going to advertise to the swing voters that we're very good at persuading, and we're going to pull enough of them across so we can take the majority in the House. Now, look, do I want that majority because I'm a radical progressive, as a lot of these people say online? No. I want the majority because there's only one party in the country right now that believes in the Republic and the Constitution and American democracy and the rule of law. And those are Democrats. I would welcome the chance if a never Trump Republican stood up and was running in one of these districts and was like, I will never vote for that motherfucker in the House. I will block everything he sends my way. I believe in my principles. I would love to find that person. I would love to find that person. I would love to support that person. I'd max out to that person. But that person doesn't exist. That person is a leprechaun riding a unicorn through a forest of cotton candy. It's not real. So for now, we're going to help take the majority, because the minute we take the majority, and I tend to be a longer term thinker than I may let on, the minute we take the majority, there's going to be something in the spring of 2027 that slams the brakes on all this bullshit. All of it. All of it. The trade war crap, the illegal deportations, the Gestapo, the weaponization of the government against Trump's political enemies. There will be consequences. And that's one thing that really motivates me to work very hard to beat their asses in 2025 and 2026. What do you think of Scott Jennings running for the U.S. Senate in the great state of Kentucky? First, I think Scott's a pussy who will not do it. I think Scott likes his comfortable sort of life at CNN, where he's free to go on TV and lie without being corrected. Scott is a colossal, pathological liar of the highest conceivable order. There's a lot of shit in Scott's life he doesn't want to talk to you about, but I'm happy to visit with that shit, Scott, very soon. I'm happy to talk about it. We know who you are and where you came from. Make your little fucking jokes, pal. I kind of hope you do run. You'll probably win, but things will happen. You will enter the finding out phase. We're going to wrap up with this one on a more happy note, on a more amusing note. Are those new glasses? Yes, they're new glasses. I've entered my mogul era, so I've got the big glasses, and I kind of like them. Thank you for the compliment. I appreciate that. Are those new glasses? I love them. So yeah, they are. And got them, ordered them a couple weeks ago from a live optician. Didn't go to Warby this time. Just got them from a real optician. And man, they fit great, and I can see. So it's kind of magical. Anyway, listen, folks. You can follow me on Substack at The Rick Wilson. You can follow the Lincoln Project podcast anywhere fine podcasts are sold. You can also catch me on the enemies list. Every Friday, I do the Elephant in the Room podcast. It's a little 15-minute mini podcast where we pull back the curtain on what's really happening underneath some political stuff. And people have really been responding well to it. They like it a lot, and I'm happy to do it. On Mondays, you can catch me with Molly Jong Fast on the Fast Politics podcast, because it's not like I don't have 7 other jobs. And you can catch me on Tuesday nights on the strategy session on Lincoln Square Media. You can catch me on Thursday nights on the breakdown with Maya May, and you can catch me whenever they drag me into a TV studio for hits, or into my living room in the front, or my front hall to do TV hits. So thank you, everybody. You are a great audience. You have been amazingly supportive of the Lincoln Project over the years. If you want to help us out, lincolnproject.us/helptlp. It's always there. We can always use your assistance. We've had an amazing response to this Virginia push we've been doing, and we're going to keep it up because we believe that election is, like I said, a big symbolic fight, and it's something that we're going to really get to in the very immediate future. So I want to thank everybody for listening today, and we will see you again on the next episode of the Lincoln Project podcast.